My name is Schumann, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my topic in a second. But first, I'd like to play a game with you all. I'm going to ask you some super simple math questions, nothing hard, I promise. And I'd like you, the second you know the answer, to shout it out for me, all right? It's the speed that matters here. Okay, what's 4 plus 4? 8. 8 plus 8? 16. 16 plus 16? Okay, I'll stop before this turns into a math class, but let's take a step back and analyze that for a second. What did you do when you knew the answer? You shouted it out, and not just because I told you to, but because it's second nature. I mean, that's what we're taught in school, right? When you know the answer to something, you should raise your hand. Share that with your peers. So it becomes easy, right? Well, actually, for some people, that can be the hardest thing in the world to do. And for me, for years, it was basically impossible. See, I used to sit in class for hours on end, knowing all the right answers, but too scared to raise my hand and say something. And it took me years to figure out why, but eventually I realized it was because I was scared my answer was wrong. And I had decided that I would rather not answer at all than give a wrong answer. And it was so frustrating once someone else had given theirs, once I knew my idea would have been right, to have to ask myself why I sat there frozen, why I couldn't raise my hand, why I couldn't speak. I was afraid of failure. Now, I know, hearing that that's my topic, some of you might be sitting back in your chairs. Leah, I don't have to listen to this talk. I don't have a fear of failure. Well, Linkagol recently showed us that 31% of adults struggle with the fear of failure. That's more than the fear of spiders, with 30%, or the fear of paranormal activity, with 15%. So yes, I'm saying you're more likely to be scared of failure than you are spiders or ghosts. Now, obviously, I can't discern your fears just from standing here looking at you any more than you can mine, but I'm going to tell you my personal story of a battle with the fear of failure, and I'd like you to not only listen, but consider an instance in your life where you might have felt or thought the same sort of thing. Now, my fear of failure started when I was 11 years old, but to understand, you're going to need some context. So let me go back to the beginning, a life without fear. I grew up the only daughter in a family with 3 brothers. Now, those of you with brothers can confirm for me, they are great at pushing your boundaries and forcing you to try new things. It's a constant competition, and the best way to survive is to beat them at everything. So it's no surprise, I was a pretty adventurous kid. I put my name on every sign-up sheet I could get at, and I tried every after-school activity I possibly could. Now, obviously, with trying all of these new things, I failed a lot. I mean, I don't even want to talk about how many times I skinned my knees during track and field. My pieces in art class, they were messy at best. Not to mention, I think there should be a world record for how many tights I tore during ballet class. But the thing is, I don't actually remember any of these failures. I mean, I know they happened because, come on, put a clumsy 8-year-old in tap shoes. But I don't remember them. These specific moments where I had failed were so inconsequential that I didn't even bother committing them to memory. They didn't matter to me. They weren't a big deal. It was just another step in my journey. This wasn't just after school either. I grew up in an incredibly small school program where the curriculum included 4 to 5 tests every single week. And yet, I can't remember a single time where I was truly scared to take a test. Sure, sometimes I was a little nervous. I had butterflies in my stomach. Do I really remember this date or this Bible verse? But I was never really scared. I was never so worried about what this have an effect on my grades that it actually gave me pure fear. And the reason for that this time isn't that it didn't happen, but it literally didn't happen. It's not that I don't remember it this time. It's that I was never truly scared. And this is for one reason, reason only. Frankly, I didn't know I was getting graded. I never got shown my report card. I didn't know I was getting one. And this is important because at that age, if I'd been shown a piece of paper that held all of my accomplishments over multiple months, I would have gone crazy. I would have only been able to see the places where I still needed to improve and not the places where I already had, which is exactly what happened when, at 11 years old, my family moved from America to Germany. Now, my introduction to this school system, as amazing as it is, was essentially my introduction to grades, and I did not take it well. While when I was younger, there was no real consequence to my failures. I didn't know they would have an effect on my grades. Now there was. And I always heard my friends discussing their straight A's, so when I started getting B's, C's, even D's, it hit me hard. I started to question my self-worth because if everyone else could get these grades, why couldn't I? What was different about me? And I realized pretty quickly that the best way to get good grades was to be perfect, all of the time, which in theory might be sort of true, but it's A, not even possible, and B, not a healthy way to look at the grading system. But still, I put this pressure on myself to never have a bad day, never not get enough sleep, or never not understand a topic, and I wanted to be perfect. And as I put this pressure on myself, my motivation to actually fulfill those goals dropped dramatically. I stopped studying for my tests. I stopped preparing my presentations. I stopped doing my projects. What I essentially decided was that if I don't do anything at all, I can't fail at anything. If I just stand here and I don't move, then I can't break anything. But if you spend your whole life standing like this, is it a life worth living? Is it a life lived in fear? I think we all know the answer to that. So while when I was younger, I had found joy in the journey, in growing, developing, and changing, whatever that looked like, no matter how many failures came with it, for the first few years of my secondary education, the only way I would allow myself to feel joy about something was if it gave me the right end result. A letter or a number on a piece of paper only ever meant to show my improvement, my journey. Now, I know this sounds like a sob story, and you're thinking, where is she going with this? Well, here's the good news. In recent years, I've stopped letting the possibility of failure govern my life with one simple habit. And if you haven't been listening since I got up on this stage, if you haven't heard a single word I've said, that's okay. But this is the important part, so remember it for me. The end of a journey is not failure. The end of a journey is the moment you decide to stop. And if that's because you've achieved everything you wanted, if you walk away from that feeling fulfilled, proud of yourself, thinking, wow, this was such a good experience, that's great. But too often, when a person with a fear of failure gives up on something, it's because they failed too much in the last steps, or they might just fail in the next. And the possibility of failure takes priority over the possibility of growth for them, like it did for me. Now, I repeated this mantra in my head endlessly when I joined TEDx this year, literally over and over and over again. And yes, it felt stupid at first. And yes, I stuttered saying it to myself outside this very hall, and I stuttered on this stage giving my audition. And yes, my first draft wasn't quite right yet, but that was okay. Because I knew this time, I really believed that I wasn't going to let the failures stop me. This wasn't going to be the end of my journey anymore, no matter how many times I stuttered, because I was going to get back up and keep going. So what I'm saying is, the way to overcome a fear of failure is to stop caring about failure. And that sounds a whole lot simpler than it is. And I wish I could tell you what that's going to look like for you. I wish I could stand here and tell you, okay, you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that, and you walk away from here with no fear of failure, but I can't. This is such a personal thing that all I can ask you is to ask yourself, what am I scared of? What truly scares me about failure? And for me, it was that failure made something not worth doing. So what I did was I took that philosophy that had been put into my head and I ran in the opposite direction. I sprinted the way that my brain was telling me not to go. I went against all my instincts. I told myself something that went against every moral that I thought I had, all of these morals that were really only holding me back, and it worked. Now, for some people, it might not look like a mantra like mine. It might look like joining a club or an after-school activity that you know you're going to fail at 1,000 times before you get anything right. It might look like literally just getting used to failure. I wish I could tell you what it is, but I still can't. All I can tell you is to go against everything your brain has ever told you. That is the best way to overcome a fear of failure. And then, when failure holds no consequence for you anymore, put positive connotations on it. Love the failures for the person they make you into. Embrace the uncertainty of life, the chaos that you never really know what's going to happen except for two constants. You will fail and you will succeed. Those are the only two things you can guarantee in every journey of your life, so love them both. Equally, not one more important than the other, both just steps in that journey. Yes, love the failures for the person they make you into, but remember, every step of a journey is perfect, no matter how many times you trip, because you got back up and you kept going. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a Bible verse, one that's helped me through many a time where I was scared to take a test. And I hope that it will help you through the same. Matthew 17:7. And Jesus came and touched them and said, "Arise and have no fear." Thank you for listening.